Hidden in 10 acres of landscaped gardens near Esher, Surrey, is one of the treasures of the 20th century. The Homewood, built in the 30s by a young architect for his parents and through the National Trust soon to belong to the nation. The architect, Patrick Gwynne, is now 81 and still lives here today.
It's a terrible thing to say, but it cost £10,500, including all the built-in furniture, and I'm not going to tell you what that costs now, because one has to multiply by 100 or something. An awful lot of people came to the house, mostly our younger friends. And in those days, we did an awful lot of dancing. And so, hence, in this room, the maple floor, which is the sort of best dance floor you can possibly have, it's also sprung a bit. And it was also a large enough room that you didn't have to move the furniture very much in order to dance.
With 1,000 little stars, we can decorate the ceiling with an optimistic feeling. We can build a little home. Every single little dream is a shingle or a rafter. We can paint the house with laughter when we build a little home. It's not a palace nor a poorhouse, but the rent is absolutely free. This is my house, but it's your house if you'll come and live with me.
The Homewood is precious because it is so little changed. Much of the original furniture and fittings is still here. It's a rare example of the modern movement in Britain, and it's to be left to the National Trust in Patrick Gwynne's will.
Well, I had no offspring or relatives who would want to live or be able to live in the house. And I felt that if it was put on the market after my time, that it would almost certainly be bought by the wrong people who would possibly misuse it, possibly furnish it in a totally unsuitable way, which would seem to me a great pity. And I felt if the Trust wanted to bring their buildings up to date, here was an opportunity for them. And I feel that that will preserve the house in some way that I would like.
The National Trust for England, Wales and Northern Ireland is just 100 years old. At its Westminster headquarters, it is the daily custom of the staff to take tea with freshly baked scones. They are now part of a grand concern, with some 207 historic houses, 600,000 acres of land, 550 miles of coastline. There are some 6,000 employees, permanent or seasonal, and 2.25 million members, more than all three main political parties put together.
Some other easy to remember numbers.
And it's got to be made tax effective and all that. I mean, whether it will come to anything or not.
All this might have surprised the three idealistic founders, whose idea was to save lovely views, old ruins and manor houses for everlasting delight. The Christian socialist Octavia Hill wanted open-air sitting rooms for the poor. Another trinity makes the decisions today.
All three of us have seen Appleby quite recently. It's on the market, and the question is, should the Trust take it on? It didn't quite meet up my expectations when I first saw it, particularly in the interior.
Well, I agree with you. Romantic though it is, and wonderful though its relationship is with the village, it's a castle of the second rank.
It's better than Bunkerstone.
Yeah.
Lord Chorley, chairman of the Trust, accountant and mountaineer. Director General Sir Angus Stirling, in his spare time chairman of the Royal Opera House. And Martin Drury, Director General in waiting.
Clear about that, it will not happen again.
It'll be a great burden on that region there.
Yep, it will, but then if it's nationally important, then they need to be helped.
I think that the relationship with the village is very important, because Appleby's...
The National Trust's purpose is to protect, now and in the future, those parts of our countryside and historic places that people hold to be very special. either for their beauty or their historic interest. Places that people go back to again and again for spiritual refreshment.
For most people, the jewels in the Trust's crown are the historic houses. This is Powys Castle, North Wales. The long gallery dates from 1587. The state bedroom, unique in Britain, echoing Louis XIV's Versailles. Blickling Hall, Norfolk. The library, with its intricate Jacobean plaster ceiling in praise of the senses. The Vine, Hampshire, a classical 18th century entrance hall. And a romantic Gothic tomb chamber, also 18th century. Attingham Park, Shropshire. One of the first picture galleries in a country house, designed by John Nash. Saltram, Devon. The 18th century great kitchen with 600 copper pans and moulds. The White Bedroom at Coteil, Cornwall, a Tudor house with its faded 17th century tapestries. And Cragside, Northumberland. Here lived William Armstrong, inventor and international arms manufacturer. It was the first house in the world to be lit by hydroelectricity. Norman Shaw completed the drawing room in time for the Prince of Wales' visit in 1884. The Great Chimney-piece, Italian marble, carved in London and said to weigh 10 tons. At the other end of the scale, also in Northumberland, is George Stephenson's birthplace, perhaps the least visited property of the National Trust. The tenant sits and waits. They do not come.
Today we've had 10 visitors. The most we've ever had was 63 on a bank holiday, and the least we've ever had was none.
Elsewhere, the National Trust is a victim of its own success. This is Dovedale in the Peak District, a place of pilgrimage, where the progress can be slow.
Dovedale is one of the most visited open properties of the National Trust, and it's estimated that between 2 and 3 million people actually come into Dovedale each year, and of those, something like 750,000 walk the entire route from the stepping stones to Hartington. On busy bank holidays, camps have been done, and 3,000 people an hour walk up past the stepping stones. A lot of people come to get away from it all and find that it's come out with them.
The Peak District is surrounded by the great Midlands industrial cities. For 10 million people, it's an easy drive to the steep gorge of the River Dove, as the warden knows only too well.
The landscape can take a certain amount of wear and tear, but when thousands of people follow the same line, it can't cope. And the main pathway has been subject to a programme of 10 years redevelopment, as it were, and a hard all-weather footpath's been put in through the whole length of Dovedale, which means you can walk from the stepping stones to Hartington without getting your boots dirty, really. When the new path was put in, one of the criticisms was that it was likened to a motorway in the middle of a beautiful area. But I think time has shown that the right decision has been made, because it's confined the erosion just to the path.
There are no crowds here. The public has not been allowed to visit Orford Ness on the Suffolk coast for 80 years. They experimented with radar here. Then they tested the trigger mechanisms of atom bombs. The Trust bought the site derelict and vandalised 2 years ago for £3.5 million. The Trust's Foundation for Art has commissioned Dennis Creffield, known for his paintings of medieval cathedrals, to record his impressions of Orford Ness.
It's my England, actually. It's got that sort of quality of my England 20th century, you know, beautiful, sad, redundant, poignant. You know, I had my first fags and sex in such build. Do you know, it's an architecture which isn't, you wouldn't call it beautiful, but it feels so strongly with our world. This grotty, but there's a beauty in that grottiness. There's no grandeur about this. There's just a sort of sadness.
The Trust now owns 5 miles of the history of 20th century warfare. What is it to do with this place?
I think we're pretty certain as to those that we want to keep and those that we want to take down. And it just leaves us with the main atomic weapons research site here as to what we should do with these enormous structures.
I think we've got to be very careful about tidiness, you know, not having our usual National Trust gut reaction that we must tidy things up.
Well, I think we're saying again, we're not going to get into the business of tidying up, because there is a straightforward choice. Either you tidy up these buildings, you remove all the bits that could drop off them, clear them out so that they're absolutely clean, safe and tidy. And we're all saying we don't want to do that.
But even if we do agree that to a great extent we're going to leave the building to degrade in its own way, we should still do a limited amount of sealing up, of blocking up windows, etc. Because what we don't want to do is cut off possibilities in the future. It may be that future generations all think of them as being much more significant than we do.
This generation thought A la Ronde in Devon significant enough for the Trust to buy it 3 years ago for nearly £300,000. 2 spinster cousins built it late in the 18th century. They decorated the top gallery themselves exquisitely with shells and feathers. People had always visited the Shell Gallery, but not, paradoxically, since the Trust took over. Now you sit downstairs and operate a remote-controlled camera. The decorations must be preserved, And these days, that means protecting them from the public.
There's some mussels. What else can you see?
Mussels.
Mussels.
They look like a peacock's feather, don't they?
A few years ago, the trust was more relaxed.
The houses were shown more or less as if the owner was there, and they were shown in a fairly informal way. And then something rather sad happened. The museum industry, for want of a better word, criticised the National Trust very strongly, what is now called the Conservation Lobby. And it was accused of letting the side down by not setting sufficient standards, by letting people touch things, by letting them sit on chairs. I mean, that was looked on as unheard of. By letting them take photographs and pictures and all those things. And gradually the rules became stricter. I, for the whole of my time, was able to defeat the rules on the whole. And if something got knocked off, well, it did. And if a naughty little girl sat down and did something on the carpet, she did. You know, it wasn't the end of the world.
I think that there's a strange paradox really involved in what the Trust is trying to do. Preserving things in perpetuity, forever and ever. In fact, it's an impossible thing to do. And I think one has to begin to ask even if it's a desirable thing to attempt. Because yes, of course, we want to save the countryside and these marvelous houses as long as we can. But actually, once you freeze a house, in any period of time, however artfully you do it, it dies. So maybe one of the attractions of visiting stately homes is to live in this imaginary world where there's no life and there's no death and everything was glorious and golden once upon a time. But it is really a fairy tale fantasy.
20 years ago, when the Trust acquired Earthig near Wrexham, it followed the tradition of the Yorks, the family who had lived there, in commemorating servants and conditions below stairs.
I think that when a house like Erdig was open to the public, a great deal was made about the fact that now downstairs was going to be on view. And although, in fact, Erdig has a very interesting collection of portraits of servants and writings and so on, when you get there, you don't really get any sense about what their lives were like. I mean, was it terribly damp? Were they freezing? You know, were they worried about losing their job? Was somebody, you know, running off or pregnant with somebody's child? I mean, whatever the worries of servants' lives were, whatever the hard conditions, you don't see any of it. You don't actually get a feeling for it.
I don't believe it's true that we offer a kind of saccharine view of the past, but I don't see how you can illustrate pain any more you can illustrate great pleasure in a house. You can show the house, you can give people access to it, you can tell them all the facts, you can share with them all the knowledge you have. Ultimately, people have to make up their own mind.
Cork Abbey, lost in a fold of the Derbyshire hills, offers another romantic experience. The country house in decline. They called it the place where time stood still. This secret house had hardly been touched for 100 years.
We didn't want to change the very mystique that the Trust found when they got here. So just about everything we do, that little philosophy is like sat on our shoulder. It was a special place before the Trust ever came to Cork. And what we've got to do, we've got to be guardians of that very special feeling rather than change it. It mustn't become National Trustified and lose that very atmosphere that we found in 1985. I mean, let's face it, things had reached a pretty low ebb, and I think the Trust came in and captured it just at the right time.
The ring.
Mm. Yes.
This is like this when they...
This is the
exactly
way it was
how it was
when
found
the
when we saw
National
it on the
Trust.
television.
Yes, yes, when the National
This is
Trust
exactly how it would be found.
For generations, the eccentric Harper crews never threw anything away. After all, in a house of 80 rooms, there was always space for more.
The bed.
They forbade cars on the estate and communicated with servants by letter.
Absolutely fascinating. But was when he married, he just shut this up with all his childhood things in and moved off to another room.
Are they going to do anything with this?
No, I think they'll leave it as it was. I mean, it was all taken down.
The Trust took on Cork Abbey after a public appeal and a massive government grant. Many other goods and properties come as bequests in wills. This is Walton Street, near Harrods in London. Francesca Scoons from head office is here because the contents of the late Miss Ward's house have been left to the Trust if certain conditions are fulfilled. Richard Keane hopes that whatever's worth keeping will come to his region, South Wales. It's his first visit.
Miss Ward lived here, I think, since about the early 50s, and she, that light's all right, and traded from here until her mother died, when she gave up, because she said, what's the point of going on working when you... I'm sorry, there's no floor.
Right.
That's because when she had some dry rot trouble, I'll just open the curtain.
Okay.
Can
you manage?
Right. She decided that there was no point in putting the floor back in, it's just a waste of money, because she'd given up using these rooms. She talked about this all as her collection, but...
Yes.
And she traded in all sorts of things, and it's just really her stock in trade. She said that she collected little things that she liked, and she, when she couldn't bear to sell something, she'd just keep it, and that's what the collection is. Oh, this is something extraordinary. It's labelled 50 shillings, and it's a tobacco pipe.
My goodness.
A glass tobacco pipe. How very extraordinary. I've never seen one before.
What's this?
And look at these flasks in their leather covers.
Super.
It's quite tight. £2. I was telephoned by the curate of St. Luke's in Chelsea who'd been to visit her, and he rang and said that she was very concerned about her collection, and he'd said to her, what about the National Trust? And so she said, well, what can they offer me? So he rang me up and said, what can you offer her? So I went round to see her, and she showed me some, at least, of her collection, nothing like all of it. She had very determined ideas about what she wanted to do. She was particularly keen that it should go into an 18th century house, and that it should all stay together and be known as the Pamela Ward collection. She was the only daughter of an elderly couple, and I think she really wanted the name in some way to be recorded for posterity.
Oh, what's this?
Oh, is it like a sort of Ouija board for
I suppose it must
ghostly
be.
writing?
Well, well, well.
Inspired from beyond the grave. How wonderful. And what else?
Ah!
Now, what are these?
Hello, it's the slip
Beautiful
of paper again.
Ivory.
Isn't she
What does she
wonderful?
say?
Everything is detailed. 9 pins,
Not cleaned.
cleaned.
But how wonderful.
27 and 6. Isn't that lovely?
It's very good, her treen, isn't it? I think it's perhaps the best part of the collection.
And the threads are so perfectly made.
And this
Ah.
is a little carpet beater. Regency, it says confidently. Well, she lived upstairs, and at the end of her life, really entirely just in the front room there. Which I suppose
The books
her
as well.
desk, and like everything else, it's absolutely full.
Oh, goodness me.
Look at those wonderful scent bottles.
Isn't it terrific?
Yes.
Oh, dear, look at this.
Oh, this is wonderful. Look, with the gold sequins. Oh!
Good grief.
It's her horn collection. Shoe horns, spoons.
I don't believe this place.
How important are legacies and bequests to the National Trust?
Financially extremely important. Last year, £25 million came to the Trust in legacies, which represents something close to a quarter of our total income. Yes, this is all brass.
Yeah.
It's happened that I've been to see somebody who wanted to leave us one piece of furniture, and at the end of the conversation they determined that they'd actually like to leave their whole house to the National Trust.
Is that what I think? It's
a shaving bowl. Fits your chin, I think.
Well, it's very appropriate because she says bleeding bowl on it.
Oh, bleeding. Oh, it's bleeding, not
yes.
shaving. How disgusting. Quite horrible. I went to see her last in March this year, just shortly before she died, and by that time she was bedridden, and I knelt down on the bed beside her. She was lying on the floor on a mattress, and she said, "How old do you think I am?" And I said, I can't imagine. And she said, I'm 88. What do you think of that? And she said, will you take everything? And I said, look, I promised you we would, and we'll find the right place, and we'll take it whenever you want. And if you're still enjoying it now, then of course you must have it. She said, how could I enjoy it now? And her eyes were completely glazed with cataracts, and that was the last time I saw her.
Miss Ward's estate was valued at £873,000. Nearly all came to the Trust. Of all the National Trust's initiatives, the most successful has been Enterprise Neptune. The appeal, launched 30 years ago to save the seaside and preserve it from development. Now, some 550 miles of fine coastline, such as this in South Cornwall, are protected in perpetuity. In 1925, long before Enterprise Neptune, another appeal helped the Trust acquire these islands off the Northumberland coast. The Farne Islands were once home to St Cuthbert and Grace Darling. Now they're a nature reserve, sheltering more than 20 species of seabird and half a dozen active National Trust wardens.
We actually count all the breeding birds, cliff nesting ones, and the birds that nest on top of the island, such as the eiders and the tern. And that's how we work out the population of the breeding birds each year. We have 34,000 pairs of puffins on the islands as a whole, about 17,000 pairs of guillemots, and we also have 4 of the 5 species of breeding sea tern in Britain. We have about 1,800 to 2,000 pairs of Arctic terns nest in our farm, and they do nest very close to the footpaths, and they attack visitors. They defend their territories very, very vigorously, and we advise everybody to wear a hat if they do come in June especially, because if they make contact with your head they can draw blood, and if they don't get you with one end they'll get you with the other, so it's advisable to wear old clothes as well, or easily washed ones. We live in the Peel Tower, which was built in 1500, and improvement-wise there's been very little done to it since then. Nothing ever got round to installing electric or running water. So all of our lighting, cooking and the fridge are run from colour gas. With there being no running water, to get a shower you have to go down to the cellar, fill 2 buckets with water from these barrels, bring them upstairs onto the first floor in our living room, and there's a kitchen on the side. Empty the buckets into a kettle, heat them up, pour them back into the bucket, bring them up onto the next floor. There's a small shower cubicle, and you get in there and pour them over your head with a jug. It's an enlightening experience.
It can be a strain with us being here 7 days a week for the 8 months, but for some people it is just another National Trust property to visit, and they get quite a bit of a shock when they find out how basic the facilities are out here, and there's no tea shop.
Many a visitor looks forward to National Trust tea as the high point of a day's outing. In the season, Norma Archer will bake 16 dozen scones daily. She makes 15 different cakes, shortbreads and biscuits. Her tea shop, one of over 200 run or franchised by the Trust, is perched high on the cliff overlooking Bedruthen Steps in North Cornwall. She's run it for 10 years. Norma's fare is a homely mix.
We're not allowed to do foreign food. We're only allowed to do English food. I can't do lasagna or anything like that, but I can do curry because seemingly curry's English. But scones, it's the best seller of anything, the cream cheese. I've just had a booking this morning for 100 National Trust members from Taunton, 50 on the Wednesday, 50 on the Friday, all for cream cheese. They get a pot of tea per person, plus 2 scones, jam and cream. You can have, we do a homemade strawberry jam, but the others are little pots. And they've got a choice of strawberry, raspberry, apricots, gooseberry, blackcurrant, or Cornish honey. This one's a date shortbread. I also do it with mincemeat. Needless to say, I don't bake when I go home.
Did you get any famous customers here?
Yes, we've had a few. We've had Mrs. Thatcher. She came for morning coffee, actually. She had flapjack and coffee, and she cleared her table and brought the pots up. We seem to have had a permanent queue there for 3 weeks, and it doesn't seem to end until we close the door on the night. The trouble is, just at the moment, I've got lots of my regulars are dying. Because we've got some lots of elderly people that have come for years, you know, and we've had 1 or 2 that has died this year, and it's quite upsetting, actually. They'll come in on their own without minus husband, or come in minus wife. And it really does upset you when you've known them a long time.
We are going to introduce to you friends and all we think you ought to know. Here's the opening chorus of the show, and it's called Liz, Sandra and Co. The Walkers, you know.
The Walkers' home is the harsh inner city area of Walker in Newcastle. Many are widows. They are over 60, some a lot over. In a pioneering project, the Trust has introduced them to some unfamiliar adventures. Hill walking, canoeing, abseiling. Today, it's orienteering at the Gibbside Estate in the Derwent Valley. In charge is 29-year-old Liz Fisher.
Stand, take it in and look at everything around you, because that map's a photograph, so if you stand, take in all of the information on the map and all of the information that's around you, then it'll start to link in. Right. Okay?
Right, so we'll go this way.
No.
Go down the lane, don't we? The road.
Have you got your water wings on?
No, I haven't got that, have I?
What about
Just
going?
trying.
Are we ready?
Yes, you can go when you're ready.
Don't forget you want to call it
I know.
round
Nice.
Oh, the blooming fly. Somebody said about
The idea behind the Inner City Project, it takes the National Trust right back to its original aims, along with the thoughts of the founder members, one of them being Octavia Hill, and she believed that the countryside should be available to everybody, and she also believed in giving the people from the inner city that chance to get out and use the countryside. Just because you're 60 doesn't mean to say that you can't climb a mountain, that you can't mountain bike ride, and we've offered them our opportunity to do that.
Oh, we're nearly there to Reflection Corner.
Are we?
Yeah.
Oh, coffee time, Moira.
For sure will make a difference.
Done them both.
I wouldn't. Oops, the sticks.
Well, I found this one anyway, thank goodness. Right, mind I wouldn't like to orientate this in the dark. Go and get it all.
You've got four.
You've got two, haven't you?
Gosh, you've
Oh,
got
four.
five. Do you want 6 or 7?
Which way you got the thing up?
That's no.
I thought.
no,
Well,
straight up
we don't have to orientate till we're up to number 7, do we?
Come on. 6 or 7.
Well, I thought National Trust was just renovating old buildings, and I found out they also renovate old people.
Yes, that's true. And it's made a new life for me. On your own, you get out, meet people, and we're a grand bunch of people. We get on great. We have a laugh, and you know, it just takes your worries away.
We've gone through these villages all our lives and never realised just what beauty there's hidden there. I mean, I only went to school half a day as the war was on, and I'm getting taught now.
The teaching methods are different here, but then so are the pupils. This is Little Morton Hall in Cheshire, mainly 16th century, the home of sturdy gentleman farmers. It was handed over to the Trust in 1938. Today, the travelling players have moved in.
Right.
The Young National Trust Theatre is a professional touring company with 6 actors. The play is specially devised for school children. They will be at the centre of the drama.
The reason that we have the Young National Trust Theatre is that essentially we want to give the children who take part a really good, fun time. For the average 9 or 10-year-old, a normal visit to a National Trust house might not be their cup of tea. They might prefer to be at home playing video games or whatever. So therefore, the aim of the theatre is to really bring the house to life, and the children take part in the play. They're not a passive audience. They have a role to play, and they work directly with our actors.
What am I to do, friends? You must think for me, for my head is a muddle.
My mistress. She has been ill of high.
Dress you up as my son?
Yeah.
That is a good plan. Well, I think you best if we were to put one of these children in William's clothes.
Why, who amongst you would do such a thing for my lady? You, boy?
Yeah.
Why, madam, look upon this boy.
Why, I do think he does bear a resemblance to William. Why, boy, do you think you are capable of such a task?
Yeah. And you have washed, have you not, boy? Yeah. Aye, then he is clean, madam.
Well, then, come, there is no time to lose, but we must put this plan into action. Boy, how old are you?
10.
Ah, indeed. Well, William was 11, so you must pretend you are 11 now.
Mistress, you'll stay in France. You must tell him.
We did live in Paris for some time, William. Oh, do you know of this city? Have you heard of it?
What?
Do you speak French, sir, mistress?
Do you know even how to say good day?
Bonjour.
Oh, spoken like a Frenchman. Why, you will convince him indeed. Bonjour, monsieur.
It is 3 years since I saw you last. You have much changed. What age are you now?
11, sir.
11 years. Your stay in France. Which town were you in? Huh?
I believe it was it Paris, William?
Ah, Paris, William. Speak you the language?
Bonjour.
Bonjour. It means?
Good day.
Good day. Bonjour. Which of your studies do you favour most?
If you like, a long-term aim is that we hope that maybe in 10, 20 years that those same children will come back to a National Trust property because they remember the nice day they had when they were 10, and that they might be the future members of the National Trust.
You're not of being a soldier?
Good morning. Are you members of the National Trust, sir? What do you want to be? A nice fellow like you. Have you ever thought of it?
Well, we got relations who are.
Norman Waugh, 79, once a pilot with Imperial Airways on patrol in one of his favourite Cornish hunting grounds.
How many children have you got?
2.
£44 for all of you.
Yeah?
Actually, it's £44 your wife can have as many children as she can bear.
Oh, don't put ideas in. Talk to you about it. No.
If you can get a smile, you're there. You've won. You know. And if a child can sit at the back seat and say, Daddy, Daddy, please join the National Trust, that really helps. You can tell a face, can't you? You can tell if a person's a cheery person, nice, happy person, or whether he's a miserable one. If you go up with a good smile and say good morning, welcome to wherever you are, and you get a smile back, you're in. Something tells me you decided to join, sir. I suppose I average 6 a day, 7 a day, probably more, actually. I used to average more, but I don't. No, I'm getting old now.
Leave it for now until we get back home, I think.
Well, that's a pity. Well, I say it's their heritage. And I use this one there. I say the Dutch and the Germans and the French say how lucky we are to have a national trust. They haven't got one, you see. We take it all for granted, don't we? If you join it, you get free admittance to some 270 houses, castles, 300 odd gardens. But we get no revenue for that. So we ask nice people like you to please support us. I mean, you get the argument sometimes where they say, oh, well, it's my country. Why have I got to join the National Trust to walk on this? That's a difficult one. That is true, really, in a way. But then I have to explain, well, we maintain it, we look after it, keep it safe. If everybody walked everywhere, the corrosion would be terrific. If you'd like to come in my office, I'll show you what you can see in Wiltshire. You'd like to do that, would you?
Well, not just yet. We'll go down and
all right.
take us to the airport.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I tried to keep away from hard stuff. I do get cross occasionally. When are you a member of the National Trust? No, I'm a member of the National, what do you call it? The nasty one.
National Front.
Not National Front. I've had that once. Which is a bit horrid. I never had a fight yet. No, people are really very nice. You know, I feel sorry for a lot of people at the moment because they haven't got the money. I mean, they want to join, and they haven't got the money.
£44 a year?
For all of you.
That's all right, isn't it?
That's marvellous. Go to 3 properties, you got your money back. Most of the excuses are, I don't know, fox hunting, you know. People won't join National Trust because of fox hunting. And I always say, well, one day they're going to win, of course. And then we have to think about fishing. There won't be any fishing. And what are we going to do? Then I say, well, I should be dead and gone by then anyway.
Deer hunting has long been a thorn in the flesh of the Trust. As early as 1934, it was asked to ban hunting on moral grounds. Recent protests have become louder, but the Trust lets hunting on its land continue because, it says, of its concern for the conservation and welfare of red deer. And it doesn't want to alienate landowners and rural communities. But now there's a plot afoot. In the very headquarters of its anti-hunting opponents, a council member of the Trust, Peter Jackson, is planning a preemptive strike by calling for an extraordinary general meeting.
Now, I think what will concentrate the mind is the loss of members. Yeah. I think the members and the importance to the Trust of the income of members. Now, I know because I've been, as you know, involved in the Trust governance for over 20 years now, and obviously there are multiple factors there, but hunting is clearly a decisive matter which leads members just not to renew. In my view, it is quite outrageous. The members' wishes are being frustrated yet again. They have been at it for 4 years now, and I really think we should brook no further delay on this.
Right, so what do you think is likely? Do you think that's likely to happen? You must talk to council members. Because I think we have a rough idea of where we go from here.
Yes. I think they're a pretty craven lot. It really depends on the lead given by the chairman and by the Director General.
The ethical question of whether hunting should or should not be allowed as an activity in this country is not one that the National Trust should adjudicate on, but is one for Parliament. Now, a resolution to that effect was put to our last annual general meeting, and it was passed by a majority of more than 3 to 1. And yet we have this member who is orchestrating a further resolution in conjunction with the League Against Cruel Sports to bring the matter back again. It is an irrelevancy. It's a waste of the National Trust time, it's a waste of money which we can ill afford and which ought to be spent on conservation projects, and I believe that that is how the members will see it.
Hunting is savagery in the name of tradition. It is hypocrisy in the name of conservation. And it is killing and cruelty in the name of sport. An honest National Trust should have nothing to do with it.
Sitting in this hall this afternoon are representatives of families from the West Country who for generations have cared for the deer there. They are the reason that there are those herds of wild red deer in the West Country which we enjoy.
I am implacably opposed to the hunting of any animal with hounds. Yes, I have seen deer hunting. Yes, I have seen the end of a deer hunt. I am also, I suppose, by implication, a member of Rent-a-Mob and undemocratic. So for the record, I'm a lifelong member of the Conservative Party, and since the gentleman mentioned it, I'm opposed to abortion and in favour of capital punishment. All right?
Hunting is an issue where well-meaning people, through sheer ignorance of the facts, can be misled, and a well-intentioned ban on stag hunting would represent a victory for political correctness over the truth.
I think your behaviour is disgraceful, and I think God will be a judge on you. And I also think that you should show a caring and compassionate nature for once. This is National Trust land, and you're lucky to have it.
I think that it is time for us to remember what the Trust is for. It is for houses of historic interest and land of natural beauty. That's why I joined the Trust. That's why my family gave land to the Trust. Not for spurious minority interests to take over and consume us.
It's not widely understood that membership of the Trust buys a season ticket to the properties, not the right to determine policy. Council doesn't have to accept the result of members' votes. Anyway, the votes usually endorse what Council and the Chairman recommend. But not today.
They won it. They won it. What are you going to do now? I'm going to go back and have a drink.
And the total votes against, 96,613. 96613.
We must keep the thing in perspective. The fact is the Trust is larger than this issue, much larger. It's not to do with its larger purposes, this. It's to do with something very specific. The resolutions have asked us to set up another working party and have asked us thereafter to have a postal ballot. So don't let's get the whole thing out of proportion and think it's a very bad day for the Trust. I wouldn't say that at all.
3 months later, the Trust announced an inquiry into the suffering of deer hunted on its land. It rejected the other resolution for a postal ballot. The glories of the Trust are its gardens. Often designed on historical principles, they are cultivated by 420 gardeners. Critics complain that they all tend to look the same and that they're a bit neat and tidy. Others just bask in their colour and splendour. After the garden, there's usually the shop. Commercial success matters to the Trust. 3/4 of the properties it owns aren't adequately endowed. It would cost £500 million to finance them properly. The Trust makes a large annual deficit, which it meets out of capital. Shops make a small profit, and every little helps.
They're absolutely authentic as to what they would wear in 1132.
Dissatisfied shoppers complain that all too often you see the same items in one shop after another. But still, they bought 114,000 pots of jam and marmalade last year, and more than 127,000 mugs.
This is nice. Pleased with that.
Yes, that's Pat Orbeck has now sort of gone one stage further.
Isn't that good?
She did the tea towel, she did the proposal for the PVC bag, and then she looked at it and thought about a mug, and I actually think it's...
It works better as a mug than it did as a washing up cloth, drying up cloth.
Back at head office, Sue Ashworth of the Trust's trading company hopes her new centenary range will pass muster.
3 goes at that. It's now 5. Isn't it? That's good.
This is Jasper from the day nursery at Whittick Manor.
Yes.
We're still not happy. Lester and I were talking about him on Friday, and his snout is not...
He's got this terrible squint.
Enough. It's not...
Appalling squint, isn't he? Look, Jasper has a charming sort of wistful smile. This chap has a squint.
Well, we'll do our best. We've now got our monster badge. You actually saw the artwork proposal.
This is Katrina Munro?
Well, this is a combination of
yes.
Katrina's animals that all the sort of National
They're
Trust
brought together by
favourites.
someone else. Everything she does has life and humour, doesn't it? Great fun, though.
Very jokey.
At Quarrybank Mill, they sell the calico cloth that's still woven on the looms. For Samuel Gregg, the end of the 18th century was a time of unparalleled prosperity, and around the great mill he built at Stile, Cheshire, grew a little village for the workers, complete with its own chapel. It's one of 60 villages owned by the Trust. But there's trouble at the mill. The country park surrounding it is under threat. Manchester Airport and the City Council want to build a second runway. The trees in Arthur's Wood on the Stile estate are in the way. It's only 9 miles from the heart of Manchester here, and a precious retreat. The Trust believes that it must oppose compulsory purchase and defend its territory at the public inquiry to come.
Anyway, this clearance is for the road there, John. That's what we sort of see as the scale of wipeout.
Where the bridge goes.
I mean,
we lose all the trees basically. What are they all?
We've got to beat Chang'e, really. I mean, we've got to beat Chang'e. Our horticulture thinks it's something like the children's. You know, I don't get emotional that often, but I feel emotional about the loss of this woodland. I think it's 150 years old,
Yes,
and in the name of progress, I think it's.
What will happen if the runway is put in there is that, first of all, the beautiful trees on the escarpment above the country park some of them will have to go, so it will damage the woods. It will create an enormous amount of extra noise and pollution. And, of course, the Trust's positive statutory duty is to act as a bulwark to its inalienable properties. That's why they came to us in the first place. The fact is, we have a corner to fight. And people need to remember that the National Trust is there for a particular purpose, namely to protect very beautiful countryside, which in this small island is highly under threat.
Another species was under threat in the 1930s.
To the Mayfair home of Viscount Esher, who through Britain's National Trust is fighting to preserve threatened British landmarks, the Marquis of Lothian brings a plan to save precious mansions from ruin.
What is your suggestion? Where an owner can no longer maintain an historic estate and garden, the National Trust should take it over, should maintain it, should allow the family to live in it, and yet give the public some regular access to it.
With the acceptance by the National Trust of this plan to maintain the historic homes of impoverished aristocrats, the public gets its first opportunity to inspect many buildings which have their place in history.
Many economically challenged aristocrats, troubled by tax bills, donated their houses to the Trust in the 50s and 60s. This is Anthony in Cornwall. Carews have lived here for 500, sometimes troubled years.
There were just two members of the Carew family who were parliamentarians, and they both had their heads chopped off. But this one was hung, drawn and quartered as well.
It was given to a National Trust in 1959. My father was extremely worried at the time about the economic situation, taxation, and the future maintenance of his house. And he really wanted to secure the future of his house, and if possible, for the family to continue to live in it. It was, in fact, a very brave decision of his, because no generation of a family who's lived in a house for generations, none of them want to be the actual generation that loses control of a house. But I backed his decision at the time, and I shall always back his decision.
Anthony is not open as often as some other properties, but it is the only house in the Trust in which what they call the donor family actually lives in all the rooms the public visits. This goes down very well with the paying customers.
We hear tremendously how nice it is to have a family atmosphere in the house. I think almost all the visitors comment on that it has a family atmosphere, and there's dog beds and ironing on the stairs and, you know, stuff left about. And they really do like that, because it means it's not a museum. It's a proper house, and a family house.
Please, don't, you mustn't touch the clothes.
I didn't touch it.
No. I'll shoot you.
Oh, for doing that?
Yes. Oh.
In the days when Sir Richard Carapola's father gave Anthony to the nation, many donors got a rather sweet deal. And Anthony is only open 12 hours a week now, or during the height of the season, 15. It's never, ever open on a Saturday. And I think he'll have to accept some more inconvenience than he's been prepared to so far, if it's going to really be fair that these houses are looked after the way they are by the National Trust. I mean, the house belongs to the nation now.
He's involved.
So, cool. I mean, that's a lot of Reynolds in one room.
It's an extraordinary arrangement. It's a peculiarly English arrangement, that a public institution and a private individual should continue to live in one building together. It's a very delicate relationship, which needs very careful handling and very great sensitivity. And I think it's more remarkable that it works most of the time, in most of the cases, than every now and then we have a tiff.
BBC Radio.
In the news today, Lord Scarsdale, the former owner of one of Derbyshire's finest historic houses, Kedleston Hall, claims that the National Trust is carrying out major changes to his family's house without his consent.
The National Trust has gradually taken away more and more furniture from some of the staterooms. It is, after all, or was, after all, built as a family home. The result is that several of the rooms, I think, look terribly bare. They're not actually consulting me. They're not really asking for my views. To me, that's arrogant and really rather insulting to me and my family. A lot of members of the public say, where's all the furniture gone? I said, well, it's nothing to do with me. It's the National Trust.
You're certainly not beating about the bush, is he, Lord Scarsdale there?
When we first went round the house, it had that lived-in appearance, you know. It looked alive, it looked...
Pictures that were on the desks in the library. We used to like all the family things because it was more like a home. Family actually living here, but now it's becoming much more of a museum, and I'm very disappointed.
I think the furnishings make a house really, make it more like a home. Really.
If you come to a house, you want to see the house or the people and their furniture as they lived in their time.
It seemed to
it's
be accentuating the architecture more than the furnishings. And so.
We can't hope to preserve a place, and a way of life. It isn't possible. What we can do is to be imaginative and thoughtful in the way we consider each building or place that we're given to preserve. So when we thought of how to present Kedleston to the public, we had to think very much that this was one of the great neoclassical works of art in Northern Europe, one of the finest buildings by Robert Adam, and that was why most people came to see it. Now, if you go there looking for warmth and fun, you're disappointed.
That's keeping you in check a bit, isn't it? Eh? That's keeping you in check.
The National Trust guide gloomily comments that no one could describe this cold neoclassical palace as welcoming. Fortunately, more popular entertainment is on offer elsewhere. The landscape garden of Claremont in Surrey. The annual Fête Champêtre, a rural revel, brings in 20,000 fun seekers and £75,000 for the Trust. August the 30th, 1989, a hot and sunny afternoon, and a day of disaster for the Trust. Up Park, on the Sussex Downs, considered by many the perfect English country house, is ablaze. Builders had been welding lead on the roof, a year's job due to finish the following day. The fine rooms and collections on the upper floor were devastated. But by courage and swift action, nearly all the precious works of art from the ground floor showrooms were saved. Only 5 major pieces of furniture downstairs were totally destroyed. The interior, however, was a sodden, charred, smoking wreck.
Down Park was a place I knew well because I used to look after it, and it's very dear to me. It was extraordinary for lots of reasons, but let me pick 3. First of all, it was in a most romantic position, high up on the South Downs, very remote, considering it's not very far from London. Secondly, it was furnished by 2 people between 1750 and 1813, with things of the very highest quality, although it's not a very big house. And from 1813, the house was hardly touched, so it was a very exceptional place.
Because much was saved, because the house was fully insured, and because there were many detailed photographs of the interior, the Trust took a controversial decision. It would restore Up Park to exactly how it was the day before the fire. This meant rediscovering some lost craft techniques. Remarkably, some of the early 19th century gilding had survived in the saloon. The rest was remade and carefully toned to match the original. Everywhere, fragments were conserved and reused if possible. They mixed lead-based paints to an old recipe, which will age appropriately. Each new decoration was an accurate copy of the original. The cost is close to £20 million. How authentic is the result?
Some people thought this was unprincipled, that we should not attempt to recreate an 18th century interior. But the truth was that the house was a damaged work of art. It was very severely damaged. And to have repaired it in any other way, to have repaired it, for example, leaving great scars showing, would have made it a disagreeable thing to see. What they'll see is 18th century wallpaper repaired with 20th century wallpaper. And they'll know that's what they're looking at, and I hope they'll marvel at the skill of the people who've achieved that extraordinary feat.
Only in the red drawing room had remnants of the original wallpaper been salvaged. Alison McDermott and her brother, specialists in paper, faced their greatest challenge.
There were hundreds and hundreds of pieces, ranging from about 4 foot square to the tiniest little fragments. Probably only about a third of the paper now hanging in the room is original, and the rest is the paper that we've created. A lot of the paper, particularly behind the paintings, was preserved from the light, and so it goes from very bright red to very pale gold, where it's been really in the daylight. So, although we've had to print several different colours of the wallpaper, really the success of it depends on the skill involved in the hand finishing. I suppose I feel that the original should be retained, even though it's in very poor condition. Although the condition itself is like part of its history. It has become dirty and discoloured and faded because it has been hanging there for over 100 years. So it's so important to preserve as much of that as you can. And without that, I think the reconstruction would be meaningless.
Should houses be allowed to die?
Personally, I feel that perhaps some houses should. But if a house has been given to the National Trust and accepted by the National Trust, then it is beholden on us to put that off for as long as we possibly can and make sure they are still there for our grandchildren.
Is there a risk of creating a fake?
It depends how much there still is left, I suppose. If you still have large amounts of contents, then you perhaps, you would not be creating a fake, or only half a fake. I think probably most people feel that it will be an exquisite Disney creation. I mean, and although you could, I'm sure, accurately say that it was an opportunity for a lot of craftspeople to revive old techniques and all that's wonderful, it is a fake, a very wonderful, if it's wonderful, you know, a wonderful fake.
Absolutely. I don't think it's a fake at all. A fake implies the intention to deceive. If I want to make you think that an object is more significant than it is, for whatever reason, that is a fake. And it seems to me that's the great difference between something which is a repair. I mean, I regard this not even as a reproduction job, as some people call it. I regard it as a very careful repair of a great work of art.
Okay, lean it in. Something's good. Yeah. Smoothly. Steady.
The debate about the restoration continues. The public can decide for itself when Up Park reopens on the 1st of June. And at the four corners of the kingdom, the Trust's day-to-day work goes on. Chirk Castle on the Welsh borders. Damp has been getting into the ancient plasterwork indoors.
Great. Okay, perfect.
There's a lot of water coming out of that. It's dry.
I think because it's getting so much water, we've got to get a mortar that's going to release the water as quick as possible, because whether we like it or not, the water's going to get wet, isn't it?
That's where we took the bulge out before.
It's a good job it's raining, actually. It's helped us.
Yeah.
Wimpole Hall, Cambridgeshire. The great glass houses are being prepared for 20,000 new bedding plants. Lantic Bay, South Cornwall. The wardens clear up the debris of the summer. Lime slaking at Wallington, Northumberland. It's the way the Romans did it 2,000 years ago. They're using the lime putty to repoint Hadrian's Wall. Modern cement mortar put in 10 years ago just hasn't lasted like the old Roman mortar. At Sutton House in Hackney, young hopefuls give of their best.
My reason haply more to bandy word for word and frown for frown. But now I see our lances up at straws, our strength as weak, our weakness past compare, that seeming to be most, which we indeed least are.
And at Llanachairon in remote West Wales, the ashes of Miss Ward of Walton Street, who left her domestic chattels to the Trust, are coming to rest. Her wishes have been fulfilled. Her collection will be housed here.
Dust thou art, and dust to dust shalt thou return. All we go down to the dust, and weeping o'er the grave, we make our song. Alleluia, alleluia.
John Nash built the house in 1795. Pamela Ward's bequest will pay for its refurbishment, and she will lie within sight of it, in the churchyard.
Believing that our sister Pamela Muriel is at rest in Christ, and rejoicing in the communion of saints, we commit her ashes to the ground, in sure and certain hope of the resurrection to eternal life. Pamela Muriel, may you rest in peace and rise in glory. Amen.